My family decided I wasn't welcome at their Christmas celebration this year. I was hurt, deeply, but I accepted their flimsy excuse about wanting a quieter, smaller gathering. But a week later, as I sat alone in my quiet house, they sent me a little Christmas surprise of their own, a $52,000 invoice from my sister's brand new sports car. They truly believed I was their personal no-limit credit card. They were about to find out in the most permanent way possible that their account had just been closed and their credit line revoked forever. The week between Christmas and New Year's has a unique kind of silence to it. The world seems to be holding its breath. For me, this year, the silence was heavier than usual. While most people were basking in the afterglow of family gatherings, I was nursing the quiet, sharp sting of deliberate exclusion. I sat on my sofa, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, scrolling mindlessly through my social media feed. And that's when I saw it. My sister, Chloe, had posted a photo album titled The Best Family Christmas Ever. There they were. My mother, Martha, my father, Robert, and Chloe, all wearing matching, garishly festive pajamas, grinning from ear to ear as they opened a mountain of presents under a perfectly decorated tree. Another photo showed them around a long dining table, raising glasses of champagne, their faces flushed with joy. Every aunt, uncle, and cousin was there, every single person, except me. The excuse my mother had given me on the phone 2 weeks prior echoed in my head. "Oh, honey, we're just doing something very small, very quiet this year, just the three of us. You know how stressful the big get-togethers can be. We'll celebrate with you properly in the new year." It was a lie, a bald-faced, easily disproven lie, and they hadn't even cared enough to cover their tracks. They hadn't just excluded me, they had broadcasted it, tagging everyone in the photos with a glaring, pointed omission of my name. I felt the familiar, dull ache of a lifetime of being the responsible, reliable, and yet somehow peripheral member of my own family. I was the one they called when they needed something, but the one they forgot when it was time to celebrate. I was about to close my laptop to shut out the images of their happy, complete family when the doorbell rang. It was the mail carrier with the package that needed a signature. After signing, I sifted through the rest of the mail. Bills, junk mail, a few holiday cards from friends, and then one envelope stood out. It was crisp, thick, and cream-colored with the embossed logo of Prestige Motors, the most expensive luxury car dealership in the city. My first thought was that it was a mistake or perhaps some bizarrely targeted piece of high-end junk mail. I slid it open with a letter opener. Inside, on heavy watermark paper, was a formal, itemized invoice. My eyes scanned the details. A 2025 Midnight Blue Starlight Coupe, sport package, premium sound system, custom leather interior. At the bottom of the page, a single, staggering number was circled in red ink. $52,341.50. I stared at it, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Then I noticed a small, pink, sticky note attached to the top corner of the invoice. The handwriting was my sister Chloe's, bubbly, looping, and almost childish, a style that made the words written on it even more insulting. It read, "Hey, big sis. Hope you had a wonderfully quiet holiday. I decided I deserved a really nice Christmas present this year, and Mom and Dad said you'd be more than happy to handle it for me. It drives like a dream. The dealership said they need the payment in full by the end of the month. Pay it ASAP. XOXO Chloe." I read the note once, then a second time, then a third. The audacity of it was a physical force, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. The winking emoji, the casual, entitled demand, the complete and utter lack of shame. They had deemed me unworthy of a seat at their Christmas table, but fully worthy of paying for my sister's extravagant toy. I looked from the $52,000 invoice in my hand to the glowing image of my smiling family on the laptop screen. And in that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. The years of quiet resentment, of dutifully playing the part of the family fixer, of sacrificing my own financial goals to bail them out of their latest self-inflicted crisis, it all went up in a silent, cleansing puff of smoke. A laugh escaped my lips. It wasn't a sound of amusement. It was a hollow, humorless, almost unhinged sound. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a resource, an oil well, a featureless, nameless bank account to be drawn from at their convenience. They had just sent me an invoice for services not rendered, and I decided in that cold, quiet, and profoundly liberating moment that it was time to send them a bill of my own, a bill for a lifetime of taking me for granted, and the payment was going to be immediate, and it was going to be steep. I sat there in the quiet of my living room, the invoice held loosely in my hand, the hollow echo of my own laugh still hanging in the air. The initial shock, the stunning, almost comical audacity of the demand, began to recede. It was replaced by something far heavier, a slow, churning tide of memory, pulling me back through years of similar moments, each one a link in the long, heavy chain of my family's entitlement. I had been their fixer for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to not be carrying their weight. My mind flew back a decade. I was 24, just starting to find my footing in my career, diligently putting away every spare dollar into a savings account. I remember the night my parents, Martha and Robert, sat me down at their kitchen table, their faces a mask of practiced solemnity. Chloe, my younger sister, had just been accepted into her dream private university, a school with a price tag to match. They explained, with a great deal of sighing and dramatic hand-wringing, that the stock market had been unpredictable and that the college fund they had so carefully built for her had been depleted. It was a bad investment, a sure thing that went south, my father had mumbled, avoiding my eyes. We're devastated, Alex. We don't know what to do. I knew even then that a bad investment was likely a new car for my mother or a lavish vacation they couldn't afford. But Chloe was sitting right there, her eyes welling up with tears at the thought of her dream being dashed. And so I did what I always did. I played the part of the responsible one. I drained my own savings account, the money I had earmarked for a down payment on my own small condo, and wrote a check to cover Chloe's first year of tuition. "We'll pay you back, honey," my mother had promised, hugging me tightly. "Every single penny. You've saved the day." They never mentioned it again. The memory dissolved, replaced by another, a few years later, the frantic late-night phone call from Chloe. She had moved into a trendy, high-rise apartment downtown that was far beyond her means, and I, against my better judgment, but worn down by a week of familial pressure, had co-signed the lease. "It's just a formality," she'd insisted. "I just need your good credit." Now, 6 months into the lease, she was calling me from a youth hostel in Barcelona. She had decided, on a whim, to quit her job and backpack through Europe with her new boyfriend. The rent was 3 weeks overdue, and the landlord was threatening to sue me for the remainder of the lease and damages. It cost me nearly $10,000 and a significant hit to my credit score to clean up her mess. Her only response was a postcard from Prague a month later with a picture of a bridge on it. The final memory was the most recent and the most raw. It was the emergency loan from my parents just last year. They had taken a luxurious 2-week trip to Hawaii, posting endless photos of luau's and helicopter tours. They returned to a massive, unexpected property tax bill they had completely forgotten about. The panic in their voices on the phone was real, but it was the panic of people accustomed to being rescued. Once again, I had stepped in, selling off a portion of my own investment portfolio to cover their irresponsibility. "It's just a short-term loan, Alex," my father had assured me. "We'll have it back to you in 6 months." It had been 18 months. The loan, like all the others, had simply evaporated into the ether of their entitlement. I looked down at the invoice in my hand. $52,341.50. It was just the latest, most brazen withdrawal from the Bank of Alex. And as I stared at that number, I finally saw the truth with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had not been helping them. I had been their enabler. My generosity wasn't seen as a gift. It was viewed as their birthright. I had spent my adult life sacrificing my own financial security, my own dreams of a home, of travel, of a comfortable retirement, to patch the ever-leaking hole of their financial irresponsibility. But they didn't know something. They couldn't possibly know. After that last loan to my parents, something inside me had finally fractured. The hurt and resentment had driven me to seek help, not from them, but for myself. I had spent the last 6 months working with a brilliant, no-nonsense financial planner and a therapist who specialized in toxic family dynamics. Together, we had built a fortress. My substantial savings and investments were now locked away in an ironclad, irrevocable trust with a neutral third-party bank as the trustee. It was my future fund, and by its legal design, even I couldn't make a withdrawal without a great deal of paperwork and a very good reason. I had, in effect, protected my future from my own family and from my own weakness to them. I had opened new accounts at a different bank, and the account they all knew about, the one they saw as their personal slush fund, now contained nothing more than my monthly operating expenses. My secret weapon wasn't a hidden identity or a sudden windfall. It was a quiet, deliberate, and legally binding declaration of my own financial independence. The Bank of Alex, the institution they had been drawing for over a decade, was for all intents and purposes bankrupt. I looked at the invoice again, and then at the picture of my smiling, happy family on the laptop screen. They were all celebrating together, secure in the knowledge that their responsible, reliable Alex would, as always, clean up the mess. A cold, powerful sense of calm washed over me. The hurt was gone. The anger was gone. All that was left was the liberating, beautiful clarity of a decision already made. They thought they had sent me a bill. They had no idea they had just sent me my Declaration of Independence. I sat there in the encroaching twilight of my living room, the garish Christmas lights of my neighbors beginning to blink on, casting cheerful, mocking patterns on my wall. The hollow laugh had died in my throat, leaving behind the stillness of a battlefield after the fighting is over. The war I had been fighting for years, a quiet, one-sided war of attrition against my family's expectations, was finally over. I had lost every battle, but in doing so, I had just realized how to win the war. My first act was a small but deeply satisfying one. I picked up my laptop, the screen still glowing with the image of my smiling, happy family. One by one, I visited the social media profiles of my mother, my father, and my sister Chloe. I didn't leave an angry comment or a passive-aggressive post. I simply clicked the block button for each of them. A digital wall was erected. It was a simple, quiet gesture, but it felt monumental. It was the first border I had ever enforced. With that done, my mind shifted from emotion to strategy. The old Alex would have agonized, would have felt the familiar pull of guilt and obligation. The old Alex would have called Mom, ready to be manipulated into paying. But the old Alex was gone, vaporized by the sheer, stunning disrespect of that $52,000 invoice. The new Alex, the one forged in that moment of hollow laughter, was a strategist. I didn't just stare at the invoice, I studied it. The dealership was Prestige Motors, the city's premier dealer for high-performance luxury vehicles. I knew it well. Their parent company, Global Auto Group, also owned the investment and wealth management firm that handled a significant portion of my trust. I was not just a customer to them. I was a high net worth client, a quiet one, but a valuable one. This was a leverage point my family could not possibly comprehend. I thought through my options. I could simply ignore the invoice. That would lead to weeks of frantic, abusive phone calls from my family, ending only when the dealership finally repossessed the car from Chloe, a messy and protracted affair. I could call my parents and Chloe and have a screaming match, a cathartic but ultimately pointless exercise. They didn't listen to reason. They only responded to consequences. No, the solution had to be cleaner, more elegant. It had to be a move that was not just defensive, but offensive. A move that would not just end this one conflict, but would end the entire dynamic permanently. The problem was not the invoice. The problem was the assumption behind it, the assumption that I would always be there to pay. I had to destroy that assumption at its foundation. And the way to do that was not to engage with my family at all. It was to engage with the dealership as a client, not as a sibling. The plan formed in my mind, cool and clear and perfect. I picked up my phone, my movements now calm and deliberate. I didn't call the main dealership number. I called the direct line for the finance manager listed on the invoice, a Mr. Alistair Finch.
He answered with a voice that was smooth and practiced. Alistair Finch, Prestige Motors. "Good afternoon, Mr. Finch," I said, my voice polite and professional. "My name is Alex Miller. I'm calling in reference to invoice number 74B91. It is for a midnight blue Starlight coupe, purchased under the name Chloe Miller." His tone immediately brightened. He was expecting payment. "Yes, Miss Miller. A beautiful car. A wonderful choice by your sister. Thank you so much for calling. Are you calling to settle the invoice by wire or credit card today?" "Neither, actually," I said calmly. "I'm calling to inform you of two things. First, I will not be paying this invoice. And second, I am formally withdrawing my name as the financial guarantor on this purchase, a role it seems I was assigned without my knowledge or consent." The smooth, practiced voice on the other end faltered. There was a moment of sputtering silence. I'm sorry, I don't understand," he finally managed. "Miss Chloe Miller and her parents assured us that you, her sibling, would be handling the full payment. The vehicle has already been driven off the lot. It has been released to her." "I understand," I said, my voice still perfectly even, "and that is very unfortunate, as it represents a significant and unvetted financial risk for your dealership, which brings me to the third part of my call." I let a beat of silence hang in the air. "As a long-standing private client of your parent company, Global Auto Group Wealth Management, client number 77B Alpha, I feel it is my fiduciary duty to provide you with some context that your sales team apparently failed to acquire. Chloe Miller has no independent income to support a purchase of this magnitude. Furthermore, she has a documented history of financial irresponsibility, including defaulting on multiple leases and loans for which I was the unfortunate cosigner. I would be more than happy to have my financial advisor forward all relevant documentation to your risk assessment department." The silence on the other end was now profound. I could almost hear the blood draining from Mr. Finch's face. He was realizing that he had released a $52,000 asset based on a verbal promise without a single signature or credit check from the actual guarantor. "I see," he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for this information, Miss Miller. This is highly irregular." "I agree. Now for the final part of my call, Mr. Finch. I would like to purchase an identical midnight blue Starlight coupe for myself. Same year, same sport package, same custom interior. Please consider my previous statement a formal cancellation of Chloe's pending sale. I will be wiring the full amount in cash from my GAGWM account within the hour. Please have the vehicle detailed and ready for my personal pickup tomorrow at noon." I hung up the phone before he could even reply. I leaned back on my sofa, a feeling of pure, cold, liberating power washing over me. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made a single threat. I had simply presented a series of calm, undeniable facts. I had used the very system of finance and status they worshipped to dismantle their entire plan. The car was no longer just a car. It was a symbol, a $52,000 Declaration of Independence. And tomorrow, I was going to drive it home.
The following day, I woke up feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The usual low-grade anxiety that came with being a member of my family was gone, replaced by a cool, clear certainty. I dressed with care, not in anything flashy, but in a well-tailored business suit that I usually reserved for important meetings. It felt like armor. It was the uniform of the new Alex, the one who was no longer accepting the supporting role in her own life. Driving to Prestige Motors felt like a pilgrimage. I was in my sensible, reliable 10-year-old sedan, a car I had kept long past its prime, because I was always funneling my money into my family's latest emergency. It was a symbol of my past self, practical, responsible, and perpetually putting my own desires on the back burner. I knew, with the thrill that was almost electric, that I would not be driving it home. The dealership was exactly as I remembered it from a few articles I'd read. A temple of modern luxury, gleaming glass walls, polished concrete floors, and scattered across the showroom floor were magnificent metal beasts, each one a masterpiece of engineering and design, sitting under spotlights like a sculpture in a museum. The air smelled of new leather and quiet, unobtainable wealth. The moment I walked through the door, a nervous-looking man in a sharp suit detached himself from the reception desk and hurried towards me. It was Mr. Finch. His earlier confidence on the phone had been replaced by an attitude of extreme, almost fearful deference. "Miss Miller, welcome," he said, his handshake a little too eager. "Thank you so much for coming in. We have all the paperwork ready for you in my office. Can I get you a coffee? An espresso? Perhaps some sparkling water?" "No, thank you, Alistair," I said, using his first name to subtly establish the new power dynamic. "Let's just get this taken care of." He led me to a private, glass-walled office where he profusely apologized for the unfortunate misunderstanding with my sister. He explained that after my call, he had immediately contacted their corporate legal team, who, on looking up my client profile with the parent company, had instructed him to offer him his full and unconditional cooperation. I accepted his apology with a gracious but firm nod. There was no need to rub it in. He was simply a pawn in a much larger family game. As I was signing the final document for the wire transfer, a commotion erupted on the showroom floor. The sound of a shrill, furious voice echoed through the serene, quiet space. I didn't even need to look up. I knew that voice better than my own. It was Chloe, and she had brought my parents with her for backup. I could see them through the glass wall of the office. Chloe, her face red and blotchy with rage, was screaming at a young salesman. My mother was wringing her hands, looking distressed, while my father was attempting to look intimidating, his arms crossed across his chest. My call to Mr. Finch had worked even faster than I had anticipated. He had clearly called Chloe and demanded the immediate return of the vehicle. "What do you mean the financing isn't secured?" Chloe shrieked, her voice attracting the attention of the few other wealthy clients in the showroom. "My brother is paying for it. There is no problem with the financing. Call him. This is my car." Mr. Finch sighed, a weary expression on his face. He looked at me. "If you'll excuse me for one moment, Miss Miller." He stood up and walked out to face them. a man walking towards his own execution.
"Miss Miller," he said to Chloe, his voice now cold and official, "there has been a change in terms. The financial guarantor for your purchase has formally withdrawn their support. Furthermore," he continued, his voice unwavering, "they provided us with information regarding your credit history that makes you an unacceptable risk for an unsecured sale of this value. The sale is void. We require you to return the keys to the vehicle immediately." "This is ridiculous," my father boomed, stepping forward. "Our son, Alex, is handling this. There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake, sir," Mr. Finch said. "Alex has been in communication with us. The decision is final." It was at that moment that I chose to make my entrance. I finished signing the last document with a flourish, stood up, and opened the office door. I walked out into the showroom. 4 pairs of eyes snapped in my direction. Chloe's furious expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "Alex, thank God! What are you doing here? Tell this incompetent manager to give me back my car. You're paying for it." I didn't even look at her. My gaze was fixed on Mr. Finch. I held up the key to my old sedan. "Alistair," I said calmly, "is my new vehicle ready?" A slow, triumphant smile spread across Mr. Finch's face. He gestured toward the glass-walled delivery bay, where a gleaming, identical, midnight blue Starlight coupe was receiving a final, loving polish from a detailer. "Yes, Miss Miller," he said, his voice ringing with satisfaction. "Your new car is right here." Then he turned his cool gaze back to Chloe. "Now, Miss Miller," he said, holding out his hand, "the keys to our car, if you please." The color drained from Chloe's face. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. My father just stared, his jaw slack with disbelief. They all looked from the invoice in Chloe's purse to me, to the identical car in the delivery bay, the terrible, impossible truth finally crashing down upon them. Chloe's hand, trembling with rage, fumbled in her designer handbag and pulled out the keys to her beloved Christmas present. With a choked sob of pure, childish fury, she threw them onto the polished showroom floor. I calmly bent down, picked up the keys, and placed them gently into Mr. Finch's waiting hand. "Thank you for your efficiency, Alistair," I said. Then, without another word, without another glance at the 3 frozen, silent statues that were my family, I turned and walked towards my new car, my new life. I slid into the driver's seat of the Starlight coupe, and for a moment, I just sat there, breathing it all in. The air was thick with the rich, intoxicating scent of new hand-stitched leather. My fingers traced the cool, smooth metal of the steering wheel. This wasn't just a car. It was a declaration. It was the physical manifestation of a boundary I had just drawn in steel and glass. I pressed the ignition button, and the engine purred to life, not with a roar, but with a low, confident hum of immense, restrained power. It felt like my own heart. I didn't look back as I pulled out of the delivery bay, but in the rearview mirror, I caught one last fleeting glimpse of them. My family. They were 3 small, pathetic figures, standing lost and helpless in the gleaming, cavernous showroom. Chloe was now openly sobbing, her face buried in my mother's shoulder. My father was just staring into space, a man who had just seen his entire retirement plan, a plan that apparently consisted of living off his oldest child, go up in smoke. My mother was looking at my departing car with an expression of pure, venomous hatred. The mask was off. I was no longer their asset. I was their enemy. I turned my eyes back to the road ahead and didn't look back. The freedom was so profound, so absolute, it was almost dizzying. I drove for an hour with no destination in mind, the powerful engine effortlessly eating up the miles of open highway. The windows were down, the wind was in my hair, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly, completely, and utterly light. I was not responsible for anyone's tuition, anyone's rent, anyone's bad decisions. I was responsible only for myself. Of course, the calls started. First, it was Chloe. I saw her name flash on my car's display and answered via the hands-free system, my voice perfectly calm. "How could you do this to me?" she shrieked, her voice a hysterical, incoherent torrent of rage and tears. "That was my car, my Christmas present. You're a horrible, selfish monster. You've ruined my life." I listened to her tantrum for a moment, the words washing over me without leaving a mark. The old me would have been racked with guilt. The new me simply recognized the sound of an entitled child who had finally been told no. "Goodbye, Chloe," I said calmly, and ended the call. Next, it was my mother. Her approach was different, more insidious. Her voice was a trembling, manipulative performance of a wounded matriarch. "Alex, I cannot believe what you've done," she began, her voice thick with fake sorrow. "You've broken your sister's heart. Your father and I are just devastated by your cruelty. After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us? By humiliating your own sister in public?" "Let me stop you right there, Mom," I said, my voice as cool and steady as the hum of the engine. "Let's be very clear about what happened. You didn't invite me for Christmas. You didn't want my presents at your family celebration, but you felt perfectly entitled to my money. You sent me a $52,000 bill for a party you deliberately excluded me from. That is not a request for help. That is an invoice, and it made me realize that our entire relationship has become purely transactional." "That's not true," she sobbed. "We love you." "No," I said, the truth of it settling in my soul with the weight of a mountain. "You don't. You love the safety net I provide. You love the convenience of my bank account. You love that I am the responsible one who cleans up your messes. For 20 years, I have been your solution, your fixer, your get-out-of-jail-free card. Consider this my formal resignation." I took a deep breath. The Bank of Alex is now permanently closed. All its assets have been liquidated and reinvested into a new long-term project, my own happiness. Do not call me about money ever again. I ended the call, and with a few taps on the screen, I blocked her number, my father's, and Chloe's. The final cord was cut. In the months that followed, I heard whispers through the family grapevine. Chloe, unable to secure a car loan on her own, had been forced to take a second job on weekends as a waitress to save up for a cheap used sedan. My parents, without my emergency financial support to prop up their lavish lifestyle, had to sell the large family home and downsize to a small condo an hour outside the city. The grapevine also told me they weren't remorseful, they were furious. They were telling everyone that their cruel, selfish daughter had abandoned them in their time of need. Hearing that was a gift. It was the final confirmation that I had made the right choice. They were incapable of change. Last week, I took my new car on a road trip up the coast, something I had always dreamed of doing but never had the disposable income for it. As I drove along the winding cliffs, the vast blue ocean stretching out to the horizon, I thought about the true cost of things. For years, I had been paying a heavy, unspoken emotional tax for the privilege of being part of a family whose love was entirely conditional. The price of admission was my own future. My vindication wasn't the gleaming car I was driving. It wasn't the image of their shocked faces in the showroom. It was this moment. The salty air, the open road, the profound, beautiful, and absolute silence on my phone. I had finally paid the most important invoice of my life. The one for my own freedom. And it was worth every single penny. The perfect story about the price of disrespect and the sweet, sweet feeling of financial freedom. What do you think of Alex's epic power move at the dealership? Have you ever been the responsible one in your family? Let us know what you would have done in this situation in the comments below. If you enjoyed this satisfying story of a well-deserved spending spree, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more daily karma stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.